Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. It is almost race week once again and we are expecting some Mercedes upgrades according to latest rumours to arrive in Baku. Their big package is going to turn up in Imola in a few weeks time, but a new suspension, an upgraded suspension, is said to arrive in Baku in a few days time to prepare that additional upgrade coming down the line. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Now first of all, on Ferrari, they're also making some changes. They've been trying hard as well to try and get more talent into their organisation. Rumours say they've hired about 30 engineers over the last 3 years, 2 of which have come from Red Bull very recently. We don't know who, but they're on gardening leave now and will work for Ferrari next year. So this is generally what happens, that Red Bull, Mercedes, their engineers tend to get poached elsewhere. Ferrari are one of the teams doing exactly that, and probably for good reason. And this was a thing with Mercedes for years when they were on top. A lot of their engineers basically got offered more money to go and work for Red Bull, and that's what they did. And over time, the talent pool maybe evens out a little bit. Red Bull have arguably the strongest team right now. Of course, Mercedes is still very strong and they will intend to be with their latest upgrades. But look, Ferrari need to get back in the hunt because they've not really been that competitive in some time. Last year was their chance, they squandered it, and they've got to go again. So hiring engineers away from Red Bull, probably a good idea. But also, Fred Vasseur given his thoughts on the Ferrari as the rest of its season, let's just say, confirming that they're not going down a B-spec route or anything like that. They do have some upgrades to come though. I think in Baku they might bring a couple of things, but they were planned before the season started with the intention their car would be good. Turns out their car compared to the competition is not good, certainly compared to the Red Bull. So the races further down the line will have a slight shift in direction, I believe they're taking. But he does say here, from Miami, Imola, not Monaco, but Barcelona, each race will have an update on the car. We are sticking to the plan, but we have made some adjustments in terms of balance and behaviour. The car is much better in Melbourne. It will continue in that direction. It's not a B car, it's not like a B-spec version. We won't come with something completely different. We'll continue to update this one and try to update it massively, talking about the budget cap and the difficulties of making a new car, and then says, look, there's still a ton of room for improvement here. So, I don't know, it's an interesting one for Ferrari. They still seem somewhat sold that this car concept is going to work. I'm not so convinced, but in Baku, they're going to bring maybe a couple of things, and then further than that, we will see some more significant changes to the Ferrari, but last year's upgrades didn't really deliver, so we'll see if this year Ferrari can do a better job on that side of things. But I don't think they really expect to be fighting Red Bull for the championship this year. I think that's out of reach, to be honest. It's out of reach for probably every team, to be honest. Mercedes will give it a go. Lewis Hamilton did say that he reckons that it might take them the entire season to catch up to Red Bull, but he is confident they can do so, especially with Gladiator, as Toto Wolff described him, James Allison, returning to the team as their technical director. We saw this news yesterday that Mike Elliott and James Allison have swapped roles. Maybe it was Mike Elliott, just from a personality perspective, might not have been the best fit to invigorate, let's say, the engineers at Mercedes, and maybe wasn't, didn't have the right personality to make the difficult call to abandon the zero-pod design and go down the direction they are currently going down. George Russell has given some additional perspective as well. I feel like every 2 weeks he says the same thing, and he mentions it again here in this article, that, big changes are happening, and he's also put in a fair bit of time on the simulator to show how well these have been going. When asked if he's been putting the time in to try the changes they're making on the sim, he says, yeah, I mean, we're working really hard at the moment for these changes. I won't give too much away, and we need to make sure they work as expected. But as we have said a number of times, I feel like I've heard this a good 3 or 4 times at this point, we are probably finding more gains in the past 2 or 3 weeks than we found over the whole winter by clearly developing in the wrong window. So it's definitely heading in the right direction. So some confidence there again, but they've said this the whole time. Now, there's an argument to be had whether being super confident is good or bad. Aston Martin were gassing the hell out of themselves in the off-season, and they were saying their car's absolutely unbelievable, and we were like, okay, wait and see. Turns out it's pretty damn good. So it's tough to say whether the team hyping itself up is actually a good or a bad sign for how competitive the Mercedes might be, but we'll see in a few races time in Imola what that really appears to be. But James Allison's involvement actually goes back slightly further than I believe we initially thought. Potentially, there were rumours a couple of weeks ago now, probably after Australia, okay, is Allison back in business here? Because he was their technical director, if you guys don't know, since 2017, helps design many phenomenal cars that won many championships, even at Ferrari and certainly at Mercedes. The last couple of years stepped into a more chief technical officer role and had a more back-end approach, let's just say, on their Formula 1 project, and now he's back effectively in charge of it again, and this seemingly happened immediately after Bahrain. Those were were the rumours coming out yesterday that he actively started working on the W14 Imola new concept. This is what some are considering the B spec, but it's effectively a brand new aerodynamic package for the car. He worked on this immediately after the tests in Bahrain, so apparently not even after the Bahrain Grand Prix, but as soon as the test happened in Bahrain, they knew this wasn't it, the car wasn't going to work. Their fears, I guess, over the off-season had been proven because they were concerned during the winter they'd gone the wrong route. We even heard rumours about 3 or 4 weeks before the season began that their car wasn't going to start where they needed because they'd made some mistakes and needed to make some alterations, and that was pretty much evident. Their season wasn't going to start particularly well. It was almost McLaren-esque where they said, yeah, our car's pretty bad, we're going to have to wait until Baku to get any good. Now we'll see what McLaren do in Baku with an upgrade they've promised for some time, but apparently Toto Wolff was on the phone day one of the test in Bahrain. He was like, yeah, the car, we thought it wasn't great, it's not great, on the phone to James Allison, please come back and save us, and that is what he has apparently started to do. So worked on that Imola upgrade and the package and the direction they shall take going forwards right at the start of the season, and that is now bearing fruit to a certain degree. Now the question is, what is going to change in the near term? Because if they're going to change 90% of what the aerodynamics currently are on the car, the side pod design, what that means for the floor, the rear wing, the beam wing, the diffuser, all these other elements that have to be redesigned as a result, and they probably have been working on this for a long time now, maybe even significantly before the season started, because if you're Ferrari and you were super confident in your car, turns out it's not that good, and you've committed a lot of resources to the development of that concept going forwards, then you struggle from a budget gap perspective. So Mercedes, being more pessimistic at the start of the year, have probably given themselves a better chance as it progresses, but of course to bring an entirely new upgrade package in Imola, there's other parts of the car that have to be changed, such as the suspension. Now the suspension has been a key talking point so far this year because Mercedes and Aston Martin share the same rear suspension, but yet Aston Martin are able to generate similar performance in the corners in terms of traction, riding the curbs, as the Red Bull does. So that raised the question for Mercedes, it must be something in their front suspension they're doing differently, or just on their suspension setup in general. We talked about the Red Bull anti-dive and anti-squat setup, which allows them to gain an awful lot of performance, especially in a straight line, does potentially carry some downsides, but I think Mercedes have realised their suspension isn't where it needs to be, and they're making some significant changes. So new mechanical components are arriving in Baku, expected to arrive in Baku. These might not necessarily be upgrades with their current package, but new heave springs, new heave dampers, new corner dampers as well, to presumably take some of the additional load or just changes in loads they expect with the new upgrade package that's going to arrive in Imola. So whether these additions and changes to their suspension make much of a difference in the short term, probably not, but it's as I kind of thought about just when we discussed it yesterday or 2 days ago, that they're making changes now to prepare for bigger changes down the line. So this is the diagram of the Mercedes W10 rear suspension, I believe this is. Obviously the 2019 World Championship winning car. Here's your heave spring, here's your heave damper, here's your corner damper, and parts of these they're going to change around. I'm sure they're looking at what Aston Martin might have been doing. I'm sure they're looking at what Red Bull have done and trying to figure out how they can, because this is the thing with the car concept. People look at the side pods as if like that's kind of the be all and end all because the zero pod is so evident compared to what the opposition are running with. But frankly, there's so much more that goes into a car concept. And I mean, the most important factor of a car is the front wing because it's the first part that hits the air, and how that flows over the rest of the car and under the floor is such a complicated process. It can't just be defined or fixed by changing the side pods. If they were just to nick Red Bull side pods from their garage and chuck them on the W14, it's not going to make the car go any faster. But as this article says, as far as the aero is concerned, it's almost clear that a step will arrive in Imola. It will bring an important change, both aesthetically and under the bonnet, to carry the new revised side pod and help generate more downforce. Some changes will be made to the cooling system, especially in the placement of the cores. This will take place between Baku and Imola to ascertain whether these changes will affect the efficiency of the power unit. That's also another interesting thing to keep an eye on, because this is the thing, you change the side pods, a lot has to change as well. Other steps will be taken to the track in Spain and Silverstone if their previous upgrades bear fruit. The current target for the team is to give Hamilton and Russell a single seater that is easier to drive and with greater downforce. Much of the work is concentrated in the air under the car between the bottom and the diffuser, the floor and the diffuser, where Mercedes is trying to recover as much downforce as possible. But in the short term, there are a few suspension changes they are making to accommodate the upgrades. I wouldn't expect any significant performance differences in Baku and in Miami. Certainly Baku, it shouldn't really be that good for Mercedes, more of a rear limited circuit as Bahrain was, where they weren't particularly particularly strong. I mean, they were the 4th fastest car that weekend, right? Whereas in Jeddah and Australia, where they were more competitive, more of a front-limited circuit where their car seems to be a bit better, but these changes to their rear suspension might be valid when it comes down to improving the performance of their car in that sense. So definitely tweet your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Just a couple of things to close out with. Firstly, from Guenther, he has definitely been making the case against the additional changes they are trying to make. We know that Stefano Domenicali and others trying to switch up the format of the weekends. Seems like draconian is kind of a team principal's favourite word nowadays, because Horner, of course, used the same term when it came to the penalty imposed on Red Bull for the cost cap breach. But as Steiner says, I think a normal race weekend, we can leave that for the time being what it is. Let's change it bit by bit. Always make sure we try something, and if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to do something different, not to be stubborn and stuck on it. That's my idea. So, he doesn't want them to go too far, but there have been some concerns that maybe they'll do way more sprint races, right? Because even some drivers have said, look, what about a 2-day weekend? Let's do FP1 qualifying and then the race on Sunday. Like, because a 3-day weekend plus the media day plus everything, like the teams arrive there on Wednesday, then they've got media day set up on Thursday, practice Friday, qualifying Saturday, race Sunday. Like, there's a lot to it when there's 24 races on the calendar, as there will be next year. Maybe just having a 2-day weekend is preferable in some senses, and maybe that's the way to go. But then, of course, the fans get less action on the weekend, so you can understand the reason why they wouldn't want to do that, and you can also understand the reason why Formula 1 would definitely be pushing for sprint races every weekend if they could. And this is the concern for the drivers and the teams, is that I'm sure the teams realize that Formula 1 is incentivized to have as many sprints as possible. Last year we had 3, this year we've got 6. Are they going to try and push it to 12? I mean, I hope not, but they might try, and that's what Steiner says. They might try and do half of the calendar, so a bit concerning there, but definitely intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.